Welcome to our next wandering walk. This time we're headed towards Mount Rushmore National Monument in South Dakota. Mount Rushmore National Monument is a colossal sculpture in the Black Hills of South Dakota, probably one of the most monumental and most recognized sculptures in the United States. The monument itself sits about 25 miles southwest of Rapid City and is near the famous Custer State Park. As you see as we start walking towards Mount Rushmore, huge representations of the heads of Presidents George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln rise above us. Each statue is about 60 feet tall, and they're carved in granite on the southeast side of Mount Rushmore. The mountain itself sits at an elevation of 5,725 feet and was named in 1885 for Charles E. Rushmore, a lawyer from New York. The memorial was designated in 1925 and dedicated in 1927. The idea of creating a monumental sculpture in the Black Hills was first suggested in 1923 by South Dakota State historian Doane Robinson. He had envisioned creating likenesses of famous Native Americans and American Old West personalities on a needle-like rock formation in Custer State Park. However, American sculptor Gutzon Borglum, who was hired to design and execute the project, rejected that site because the rock there was too eroded and unstable, and instead chose nearby Mount Rushmore with its solid granite rock face. Borglum also proposed that the four heads in the sculpture symbolize the first 150 years of the United States. Therefore, Washington was added to represent the country's founding, Jefferson, its expansion across the continent, Roosevelt for his development domestically and as a global power, and Lincoln was represented as preservation through the ordeal of the Civil War. Work on the memorial began in October 1927, shortly after its dedication by President Calvin Coolidge, and continued off and on for the next 14 years. Progress was hampered by periodic funding shortfalls, design issues, like, for instance, the likeness of Jefferson, who was originally on Washington's right side, had to be redone on the other side, and the death of Borglum in March 1941. He died several months before the sculpture was finished. Borglum's son, Lincoln, took over the final work on the project, which was completed in October 1941. In all, the work consisted of 6.5 years of actual carving by hundreds of workers who used dynamite, jackhammers, chisels, and drills to shape the massive stone sculpture. Borglum's technique involved blasting away much of the rock with explosives, drilling a large number of closely spaced holes, and then chipping the remaining rock away until the surface was smooth. Much of the 450,000 tons of rock removed in the process was left at the heap of a base of the memorial. The federal government paid most of the nearly $1 million cost, with the remainder coming from private donations. Washington's head was dedicated in 1930, Jefferson's in 1936, Lincoln in 1937, and Roosevelt's in 1939. Our tour continues through the museum at Mount Rushmore. Here you can learn about how the museum was sculpted, who the sculptor was, and so much more. I hope you enjoyed this walk through the museum. You've enjoyed taking a look at Mount Rushmore, and make sure to like and subscribe to this video.
Studio's on the trail. Oh, awesome.
One thing I got to tell you about Morgan, this I always marvel at. He was, in the old studio, he'd get out his glasses. He would study that here. Then he'd run down and he'd jump in that bucket, and he would come up, run over and get in the saddle, and we always had a paint can with a little brush. And he'd go down over that mountain, and he would put 5 inches here, 6 inches there. No way before they were actually cut into the mountain.
Once Borglum was convinced of his artistic direction, he would measure the mountain and transfer the dimensions to the mountain, using an ancient sculptor's tool called the pointing system. This technique enabled him to take three-dimensional measurements of the model and transfer that exact information to the mountain. A bar connected to a protractor plate was attached to the top of the model scales. A corresponding large-scale version of the pointing tool was also attached to the mountaintop. The bar extended out over the faces and could be rotated to any degree. A weighted plumb line extended down from the bar to the surface of the model. The protractor angle, as well as the position and length of the plumb line, were all recorded. On top of the memorial, the measurements were multiplied times 12, an inch on the model for every foot on the mountain. The plumb line on the mountain was angled and lowered to match the corresponding measurements. Rock was removed until each point on the mountain matched exactly with each point from the model. This process was repeated thousands of times during the creation of the memorial. The pointing system was never exactly perfect, since even small differences can become exaggerated when transferred from the 6-foot faces on the model to the 60-foot faces on the mountain. But Borglum's skill and genius as a sculptor allowed him to finesse the stone and bring the faces to life. The results of Borglum's handiwork have earned him world-renowned praise as the man who transformed a mountain into a larger-than-life work of art. Mount Rushmore is more than a mere symbol of American ideals. It is first and foremost a massive sculpture revealed on a much smaller scale. The artist's vision
the human body with light. So, I guess light has been my theme, really, all through life. And when I had this wonderful opportunity to go with Mr. Borglum, he said to me that there was one phase of making a monument sized again each face, 6 feet. And
I think it's partially right. They always brag about nobody ever getting any lands.
President of the United States, George Bush.
50 years ago, brave Americans completed this monument to four great nations. It took 14 years, enormous sacrifice, and a daring worthy of our nation. When the great producer-director Cecil B. DeMille described it, here's what he said. Not only do you look at the mountains,
matched
they
exactly
look at you each one.
from the model.
Today we place never